Did you know that the average homeowner has at least 40 times greater the net worth than the average renter in that same income level? Hit it! What's up, everybody? Mark Yancich here with Active Duty Passive Income. And yes, what I just said is pretty astounding. But as always, before we start, if you wouldn't mind giving us a little donation by smashing that like button, subscribing, hitting the bell so that you hear about all the videos that we come out with all this valuable, awesome content for military real estate investors and their families.
Welcome back to the show.
Guess what the biggest hurdle is for most people to own a home? Like, if that is a fact, the possibility of becoming at least 40 times wealthier than the average renter, then why wouldn't you own a home? Well, guess what? The biggest hurdle, as it turns out, from a study that the Federal Reserve did in 2019, is that at least 6 out of 10 Americans feel like they do not have enough money for a down payment.
Money, I need money.
So what does that mean? If you stack those two stats on top of each other, what that means is that as veterans, as military families, we have a distinct advantage to get our foot in the door and get ahead of the game big time at growing our own wealth. And here's the coolest part, is if you stack that with another element of real estate investing, the one that ADPI, Active Duty Passive Income, really cares about, cash flow, then the game changes even more. Because if you walk into buying a home versus renting a home, if you walk into that decision, a decision that every single service member has when they PCS, when they go to a new duty station, when they're thinking about how they want to live, what they're going to do when they're there, how long they're going to be there, are they going to have pets, are they going to want a house, are they want an apartment? Whenever you have that big decision, when you're thinking about the school district, when you're thinking about how many rooms you want, when that decision comes up,
All day long, it's just decisions.
the biggest piece is the financial piece. Rent versus buy. Rent versus buy. It is almost a no-brainer most of the time because we have zero barrier to entry to buy a home. The only real thing you need to make sure you do is run the numbers, because the last thing you want to do, right? You don't want to be in one of those markets where the rent is so low compared to the price, like that ratio, where it's so far away from the 1% rule, like I spoke in the previous video, that if you rent that home out after you leave that duty station, that it'll be like barely covering like even the interest on your loan. You need it to cover principal, interest, taxes, insurance, property management, maintenance, and vacancy, and then some. So you need to make sure that your rent potential is significant to handle all the expenses. Now, back to the decision at hand. Rent versus buy, rent versus buy. When do you rent? Well, sometimes renting definitely makes sense if you need like some more flexibility. Sometimes, especially if you rent out a room from somebody else who's actually house hacking, right? Or whatever. Because if it's like a 3-month thing, you're in, you're out, boom. Also, sometimes renting makes sense if simply like the priority or the lifestyle is to be on the water or to be in a certain district or to be in a certain neighborhood. Like that is your family's priority, and there's simply nothing that makes sense to buy in that area. Well, then, renting is a personal choice. There's nothing that ADPI says is like, oh, that's a bad idea. It just means that sometimes there are other priorities that supersede that financial decision. However, if those do not exist, if there is a solution, if there are compromises that can be made, then really renting versus owning, it's all about mindset, education, and finding the right people to help you get the best deal.
Get the best deal you can.
Because it's always going to be better in the long term. We got the appreciation, which we can't bank on every single year. Who knows? Another 2008 might happen. I don't think so. But if it does, if it still cash flows, you're good. Then you also have the amazing thing called depreciation. If you're renting that thing out, the income you're going to be making from that cash flow is going to be tax-free. Or tax deferred, really, but if you play your cards right, it'll be tax-free for your lifetime. And then on top of all of that, somebody's paying down the debt on that home. So now, as you're sleeping, your net worth goes up and up and up because that debt goes down and down and down, and you don't know about it, you don't care, it's just happening. Now, let's go take a look at what everybody posted in our group. So I actually started a post, and I posed a question. I was like, hey, what do you think about? What are the things you consider when renting versus buying? I mean, both are legitimate options, but when it comes to wealth building, you really want to try to stack your cards right to be able to buy a house. Sometimes, again, I'm just going to say this one more time, ADPI is not providing financial advice here. We do not recommend to buy all the time. On the contrary, we say that you have to educate yourselves and make an educated decision. However, we do want to outline the benefits of buying so that you walk into this with the right mindset and you don't get scared away at the first, hurdle. Now, so I posted this question. Back to the question, right? I posted the question and I got an amazing response from the community. So many people provided their 2 cents on what they do when they think about buying versus renting. So let's just check it out. All right. So for example, first person, I loved this comment. It was hilarious to me. To clarify the question, Paul goes, do I want my BAH to pay my mortgage or do I want my BAH to pay your mortgage? I see what you did there, Paul. See, the funny thing is again, when you're renting, you're paying somebody else's mortgage. So think about that. All right, next person. So Melanie brought up a point. She says, yeah, we regret the times we rented, even when we had a 7-month stint. It's too easy to rent it out afterwards. Pretty much every duty station, there's always a demand for rentals. I kind of have to agree that most duty stations are in areas where there's, good stable job growth. Not all. I have seen places where, in fact, a base gets shut down. Also, some places it doesn't matter how good the job growth is. The rent to price ratio is just skewed in the wrong direction, and you'll never be able to cover your expenses and mortgage, right? But for the most part, a lot of times, there's a deal to be had at most duty stations, all right? So Michelle said sellability or rentability and market trends, right? So she's approaching it from like a researching stance. Like she wants to make sure that the market trends are good. So the first thing I look at is like job growth. With job growth follows population growth. With population growth goes, supply and demand, rent prices might go up, and then everything kind of happens, right? As it just kind of trickles into the economy and things just start growing. So she continues to say, if we can seemingly make good equity in 2 years, we've decided to buy. So she applies like a 2-year rule. Like if they're going to be there for 2 years, she thinks they can accumulate some equity. Maybe they do some, some sweat equity. They renovate the house a little bit, or it's just obviously uptrending in that area. Then they decide to buy. Currently renting out our last home because we might return. Otherwise, we probably would have sold after 2 years. All right, so it sounds like Michelle, they're used to live in flipping. They like to live in it for 2 years, sell the house, not pay any capital gains taxes on it because it was a primary residence, and then maybe they deploy that cash that they made from the sale into rental properties in a place where the rent to price ratio is way better, right? So that makes perfect sense. What else do we got? Princess said, I pocket 30 to 60K whenever I PCS from my home. It's like putting my BAH in a savings account. Why would I rent and hand that over to someone else? And then somebody else wrote, this is probably the best way I've ever heard it put. LOL. Yeah, I've got to read. If you can pull that off, you can pocket 30 to 60K whenever you PCS. It is a no-brainer. Again, disclaimer, make sure you run the numbers, but if you are smart enough, you educate yourself, you register for our Military Real Estate Investing Academy, and you're a part of our group, and you really read everything that we put out, all of our blogs and our podcasts, you're going to be at the point where, as long as you have that little bit of confidence, you're going to be at the point where you can reasonably figure this out. You should be able to find an amazing property in most duty stations that will serve you well. All right, moving on. If you like paying other people's mortgages, PM me for my account information. Haha, Anthony.
LOL.
Laugh out loud. Yeah, that's what I did.
All right, Jim says, have PCS'd 13 times, holy mackerel, in 20 years. Bought 3 times. My first rule, only buy when assigned for 24 plus months. And no, I will stay that time. So like an assured 2 years at a duty station. Okay. Gives me plenty of DIY time and to really know the area. I love that piece. This person has a plan, and I think that's probably the most important thing. Know yourself, know your financial strategy, and then have a plan for yourself that fits you. You make a simple rule so that you don't stress out. You're like, hey, 24 months, that's the cutoff. If we're going to be there 24 months, boom, I'm going to find a deal. Maybe they go in the Airbnb for a month, figure out the area, then they buy. They have enough time to do a little bit of, do-it-yourself sweat equity, renovations, what have you, and then they make it a live and flip, or they turn around and rent it and on to the next duty station. Fantastic. I love that. Brian says, I look at all-in mortgage price, so PITI. Remember, I talked about this in the previous video. Principal, interest, taxes, insurance versus rents for a similar home. If I can rent the house out and break even on cash flow, I buy. All right, so there we go. Similar to what we've been talking about this whole time. So Vaijun says, rule number 1, don't buy for appreciation, buy for positive cash flow. Rent minus mortgage plus insurance plus maintenance and average unrented time has to be positive. Absolutely. And what he means by average unrented time there is basically vacancies. So if in an area where the average vacancy is maybe 5%, and you're kind of like annualizing what that month-to-month rent would be, you subtract what the average vacancy would be, like before you get to your bottom line. So let's say you're making $1,000, the average vacancy is 10%, you take off $100 for vacancy every single month to help you calculate that cash flow. But I digress. Moving on. If not positive, I wouldn't even entertain the idea of buying. All right, they're strict. That's good. That makes sense to me. Again, I think the most important thing is to follow a plan that you are comfortable with and have a strategy behind it. Boom, done. And just to foot stomp this piece one more time, at ADPI, what we believe is when you're going to buy, make sure you have a reasonable projection that it will cash flow when you move out of the house, because that way you're bettering your lifestyle instead of hindering it on your path to financial freedom. You want to take deliberate steps towards financial freedom while making your lifestyle better. You don't want it to suck the whole way through, all right? So that's why we do the cash flow analysis. We run the numbers, PITI, PMMV, every single dang time, okay? Now, if you want to learn how to do that better, or if you want to work with a real estate agent and lender that know how to do that and that will work with you on making sure you find the best property, hit us up at activedutypassiveincome.com/connect. Also, go to our resources page, activedutypassiveincome.com/resources, and hit up the masterclass for military real estate investing Academy. And that way you'll get to learn about all of this number stuff, and it seems so complicated, but we'll make it way, way, way easier to understand. And that way you'll have a back of the napkin analysis, you'll have a deeper way of doing analysis, you'll have amazing professionals helping you every single step of the way, and you'll be able to take deliberate steps to your financial freedom number, whatever that is. All right? Okay, Markian Sitch is out. Stay tuned, subscribe for some more of these awesome videos. I'll see you guys later. Bye.